For the love of CONCACAF, what was that? Of all the ways we thought the U.S. versus Panama could possibly go, nobody had a Tim Weah 18-minute punch-to-the-face red card on their bingo card. That was about as unmitigated of a disaster as we possibly could have expected, and yet everybody's getting the narrative wrong. Of all the things Gregg Berhalter has done wrong over the years, this game was not really one of them. He wasn't great, but this was not all his fault. We're going to get into why that was next, here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. I'm mad. I'm mad at the United States men's national team. I'm mad at U.S. soccer. I'm mad at United States fans because they have put me in a position where I have to defend Gregg Berhalter, and that is not a position I like to be in. But he is getting all the blame for this game, and it really was not his fault. There's not a lot he could have done. The narrative pushing Berhalter out is all wrong here, and we're going to talk about why that is on this episode. But before we do, go ahead and subscribe to the channel for me so you can follow this and all of our videos that come out. Get down in that comment section. Why is it all Berhalter's fault? I need a better argument than I'm seeing on men's soccer Twitter, so get down in that comment section for me. You can also leave comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. So listen, I'm not a Berhalter apologist. I'm not a massive Berhalter out guy. If you follow the channel, if you go back and look at any of the many videos I've done on the men's national team and on Berhalter, you'll see that I'm not a pro Berhalter guy. I don't think he's a good coach. I don't think he should have been rehired when he was rehired. I think he's at best average. On the scale of 10 being the biggest Berhalter apologist there is, and 1 being the most diehard Berhalter out guy there is, I'm like a 2.5, 3, right? I don't defend him. He's not a particularly good coach. He's a completely unimaginative coach. He brings very little to the table, and he could be replaced very, very easily. He's also not the worst coach in the world, and he's not the disaster that everybody seems to think he is. But he does have some major flaws, and he should not have been rehired, and he's not a particularly good coach. Are we good now that I've got that out on the record? I'm not a Berhalter apologist. But if your takeaway from last night's game was that Berhalter has to go, you are pushing the narrative too far, and you are missing the point. This was not all on Berhalter. In fact, very little of last night was on Berhalter, because when you go down a man, there is very, very little you can do as a coach. Everybody wants to debate strategy and how they played after Tim Weah went off. There's really not that much you can do, and if you're arguing about formations, you don't understand formations, and you put way too much value in formations, and everyone who's arguing that it should have been a 4-3-2 instead of a 4-4-1 or whatever they dropped into, which was very fluid and makeshift anyway, you're missing the point, because formations are fluid. They're fluid throughout the game. They're also, any formation you see before a game, you see a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 or a 3-4-2-1, whatever a team chooses to go with before the game. That's not actually the formation they play the whole game. Every team has 2 different formations, the one they drop into on defense and the one they go into when they're in possession. Well, when you go down a man, you don't really have that much possession. So if you're arguing that they should have had one more guy forward, when they barely had the ball after that. So you're putting way too much stock in formations. You're getting way too into tactics. When you lose a man, particularly when you lose a man that early in the game, your hands are tied. Your hands are tied. You can argue that Berhalter is not a tactical genius. He's not particularly good at tactics. But honestly, he gets a pass for the remaining 70 minutes of this game from a tactics standpoint, because there's very little he could have done. I don't have any issue with him dropping deep and playing for the tie, even after they gave up that goal. They got the lead, and then 4 minutes later, they gave it back. There was not even enough time to make any adjustments. Remember, these games just go on, and there's no timeouts, right? So you can't draw up a plan and say, hey, we got a lead now, let's adjust. It was 4 minutes, and they were back to being tied. I have no problem with playing for the draw. 1 point means you only need 1 point against Uruguay, and frankly, I think 1 point against Uruguay is probably about the best they can do. Uruguay's a better team, but I don't mind that strategy. Once you're down a man, listen, if he had come into this game and played for a draw from the get-go, I'd have a problem with it. That's a weak, passive approach, and I would be banging the drum on firing him there. That would have been a fireable offense. But once you lose Tim Weah and you give that lead back almost instantaneously, I don't mind dropping deep and playing for the tie at that point, playing for the point. I don't mind that strategy. That does not bother me. Additionally, everyone immediately got mad after the game that they just hunkered down for the remaining 70 minutes. They honestly really didn't. They didn't. They dropped deep because they had to, and they didn't have a lot of possession because they were down a man. You cannot underestimate how important it is when you are down a man and how much that hurts you tactically in your ability to get those loose balls and to get those 50-50s and to keep possession. It hurts so much. But even being down a man, they still forced some chances. They still got forward. It wasn't like when they got possession, they just kicked it deep and reset and said, okay, let's brace for impact again. No, they made some runs. There were some chances. Balogun had a chance for a second goal, even while down a man. They did make some attacking runs, and not just in the last 20 minutes, throughout the game. When they did get possession, they went on the counterattack. I was actually very impressed by that. So I don't know what game everybody was watching, but I did not see a team that just sat back and said, let's try to hold a lead for 70 minutes any more than they have to when they are down a man. You have to do that to a certain extent. You have to drop deep and play some defense. You cannot just flat out go on the counterattack, and I'll bet you, US men's Twitter, all you guys they're calling for Berhalter out every time anything goes wrong. And again, I don't love the guy, but he can't be at fault for everything. And if they had been on a massive counterattack or really stepped on the gas pedal and tried to go out and win this game on the attack, on the front foot, while down a man, and then ultimately gave up a counterattack goal, you would all be screaming from the rooftops. You would be hating it. Not one of you, not a single one of you would have said, that's okay, at least they tried to go win this game. No, you all would have been talking about the lack of tactics and how Berhalter doesn't know anything and about how your little brother who plays FIFA knows more than him. No, you're all wrong because you're all just angry at Berhalter. It's a narrative, and I get it. He shouldn't be the coach. He shouldn't have been brought back after the World Cup. I'm with you. But this isn't the day for that argument. Today was Tim Weah's fault. This game was Tim Weah's fault. 100%. 100%. I don't put any blame anywhere else other than on Tim Weah, because everything else that had to happen, and I'll get into some of the substitutions that Berhalter made that don't make any sense later, but they were all a result of being put in this situation. Tim Weah, you messed up. You messed up. Now, I am not calling for Tim Weah's head. I'm not saying you should never wear the jersey again. All these ridiculous statements that fans are making. You're wrong. You're flat out wrong. He's a player who lost his cool and made a dumb mistake. That's it. It happens. It happens. I'm sure he was provoked. I'm sure there was some trash being talked. You still can't do it. I'm not excusing it at all. He lost his cool. He did something dumb. There's cameras everywhere. You don't get away with that anymore. You cost your team a game. You probably cost them the tournament, and you probably cost Gregg Berhalter his job, which is ridiculous, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this is 100% on Tim Weah. And again, so many people are trying to push the narrative that is on Berhalter, that he has to have them prepared to play, and that this is a reflection of the coach. No, get off your narrative. If you want to argue that Berhalter should be fired, you can do it 100 ways to Sunday without making stuff up. It is not Gregg Berhalter's fault that Tim Weah punched some dude in the head, okay? The only time that's a reflection of the coach is if you have a really aggressive, constantly pushing the envelope type coach, and he has instilled that in his players, and then they take it too far. We saw that with Marco Silva at Fulham. With Dusan Vlahovic, not Dusan Vlahovic, Mitrovic, getting in fights and getting kicked out of games. That kind of thing can happen. This is not Gregg Berhalter. He's like the chillest guy in the world. In fact, that's a part of the problem. He has not instilled this in them. This is Tim Weah losing his cool. And don't tell me he should have had them prepared. This is not Tim Weah's first game. He's been in CONCACAF. He's a veteran at this point. They didn't know that Panama was gonna talk a lot of trash and try to get under your skin. And oh, by the way, your captain, Tyler Adams, wasn't the captain in this game, but he was your World Cup captain. He's made a career out of doing this same stuff, right? It's all part of the game. You got to be better than that. And if Tim Weah needed Gregg Berhalter to remind him of that, Tim Weah is the problem. So I 100% put the blame here on Tim Weah. I'm not going to crucify him forever. I hope he plays when he gets back. He messed up. He owned it. It happens. Guys lose their cool. Pulisic almost got tossed after he got tackled at the end with the red card. He easily could have gotten tossed. You lose your cool. It happens. It happens. It can't happen, but it happens. And that, of all things, is not Gregg Berhalter's fault. Now, here's what was Gregg Berhalter's fault. The substitutions I did not understand, particularly the Fowler and Balogun substitution around the 60th minute mark. Now, had you taken him out for a defensive player, I would have understood it because that would have fit with being down a man and sitting back. I still wouldn't like it, but at least I'd understand that. There would have been a tactical, logical consistency to that move. Too defensive for my liking, because even when you get an opportunity for a counterattack, you wouldn't have had anybody other than Christian Pulisic really to pull it off. But I understand it. I would at least follow that train of thought. I do not, in any way, shape, or form, understand the logic between taking off Fowler and Balogun and putting on Ricardo Pepi. Of all people, Ricardo Pepi. I would have gone with Josh Sargent at that point. I don't think Ricardo Pepi is very good, frankly. That's just my personal opinion. Unless Balogun was hurt, he did not appear to be overly fatigued. I guess the thought process is he's our best chance to score against Uruguay, and we need him for all 90 minutes there. I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't like that one at all. That's where you can critique Berhalter, is on the substitutions. I think this would have been a great game for Yunus Musa. He's one of our best ball carriers. When you're down a man, you don't get the passing opportunities as much, so you do need to dribble by guys. He's really good at advancing the ball with his feet. I think this would have been a great game for him to come in. I do think going 3 defenders at the back was too much. I don't quite know why we went there with Cameron Carter-Vickers, not replacing Chris Richards or Tim Ream, but joining them. I don't think that was necessary. So I don't love the substitutions, but I understand the tactics, and even the Carter-Vickers one. I understand, hey, we're down a man, we gotta hunker down and try and get this point. I understand it. That one doesn't bother me as much. The Fowler and Balogun one, for the life of me, I don't understand. And this is the stuff you should be critiquing Gregg Berhalter about, not the fact that Tim Weah punched a guy in the head. The ultimate irony here is that this, of all things, this is probably what cost Gregg Berhalter his job, right? The most common narrative right now is if, or at this point when, the United States does not make it out of the group stage, Gregg Berhalter is going to lose his job. And that's probably true. And I don't know if how they're gonna do against Uruguay or not, but it's going to take a really good game for them to beat Uruguay. But of all the things that are finally going to get Gregg Berhalter fired, for it to be a Tim Weah punch in the head against Panama that cost them a game, just shows the utter incompetence of U.S. soccer and how results-based they are and their decision-making is. This is like getting Al Capone on tax evasion, right? For all the murders and all the bootlegging and all the other stuff, they got him on tax evasion. So for all the incompetencies that Gregg Berhalter has shown over the years, and the tactical ineptitude, and the wacky substitutions, and the terrible accountability in press conferences, you're going to get him for losing a game that actually wasn't even all that much his fault, because Tim Weah decided to lose his cool and they played down a man for 70 minutes. That just shows how inept U.S. soccer is. They are so results driven. If Berhalter hadn't gotten out of the group stage in the World Cup, he probably wouldn't have gotten back in the coaching ranks, gotten his coaching position back in the first place, because it's so results driven. And that's absurd. You can see what Berhalter is or isn't. There is so much randomness on the field. A ball that is an inch inside the post versus an inch outside the post. Christian Pulisic making a great move and barely getting tripped versus beating his man. There is so much randomness to the game that basing your decision on something like your men's national team coach on the outcome of one game, any one game, is utterly incompetent. We know what Berhalter is. If you liked him before this tournament, he hadn't changed. So what has changed? What is making you change your mind to fire him? He's also the same guy that you rehired, and you shouldn't have rehired. You knew who he was. So I don't understand why that's the narrative, but it probably is true, and it's because they are so results-based as an organization, as a decision-making body, and that is just so the wrong way to go about doing it. Let me be very clear. I hope he gets fired, frankly. He shouldn't be the coach. I've said many times already on this video and in other videos, he shouldn't have been brought back after the World Cup. I don't think he should have gone to the World Cup. I don't think he's a good coach. But nothing's changed. And the outcome of this tournament doesn't change that. So there is a complete lack of logical consistency from U.S. soccer, and it starts at the top and works its way down. I really hoped that Matt Crocker was going to be a difference maker. It appears that he is not, because he just then rehired Berhalter, and it's the same old, and here we are. But ironically, this probably will achieve the thing that everybody's hoping for, which is to get Berhalter out. And I do ultimately think that's the right end result, even if the way U.S. Soccer is going about that decision is basically as incompetent as the guy they're firing. This is like playing a poker hand all wrong and then getting the right card on the river to win the pot. That's basically what's happening to U.S. Soccer. They're going to get the right end result, but they've done everything wrong to get through the process. So I don't know where we go from here. Tim Weah is going to be out for a Uruguay game. That's not the end of the world. At least we got 11 guys. Somebody will come in to replace him. Maybe Malik Tillman will see the field. Maybe Brendan Aronson. Who knows? We got options. It's not looking good. It's not looking good for this tournament. Uruguay's a really good team. You saw what they went and did against Bolivia. That's what a good team does against Bolivia. Not the sloppy mess that the U.S. put out there, and they got their nice little 2-0 win, but it was sloppy. It was disjointed. No, Uruguay took it to them. That's what good teams do. That's what well-coached teams do. That's what hungry teams do. I will say, I want to commend the other 10 players that were on the pitch to start the game for the United States and all the subs that came on. This team played hard and they played hungry. And that's a criticism we have had of this team on many occasions. They come out, they look lackluster, they look like they're sleepwalking a little bit. They don't always get up for these games. And I don't know that they had the intensity I would have loved in the first 20 minutes, but at the very least, once Tim Weah went out, they sprung to life. That was a valiant effort by the rest of the team. They played hard, they ran hard, they put up a good fight, and they almost stole that point. And they should be commended for that. I wish it didn't take that to wake them up. I hope they can figure out where that came from and channel it against Uruguay, because it's going to take every bit of that against Uruguay. But I do want to give credit where it's due. I don't know if that comes from Berhalter or Pulisic or the collective group or where it comes from, but they found it. They flipped that switch, and it was a lot of fun to watch, other than the inevitable goal you knew was coming because they simply were running out of steam at the end. But great effort by the rest of the guys. And Tim Weah, you messed up, and it probably cost them the tournament, and it probably cost Gregg Berhalter his job. And that sort of end result is just so indicative of where we are as a U.S. soccer program. And it's why we're not one of the best teams in the world, despite having talent that really should be. I would love to get your thoughts on all this. Where do you stand on Berhalter in general, and particularly in this game, and how it affects his career, his legacy, and ultimately his standing in the job? Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub. While you're at it, make sure you hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.